It's time once again for another edition of Talk to Me. And now, here's Emmy himself, 8-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, Maynard Eaton.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Talk to Me. As you know, each week we talk to a variety of influencers, political, educational, whatever. Today, we have the most preeminent Black attorney in America. She's the president of the National Bar Association. Welcome, please, Miss Attorney C.K. Hoffler.
Good morning, man. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Not only are you the top Black lawyer and head of the National Bar Association, you just argued the lead attorney in a major voter purge case in Georgia that has national implications. Can you tell us about that, please?
Well, certainly. And I just want to reiterate, we had a team of lawyers that worked very, very hard, led, of course, by NBA. Many of our lawyers are NBA lawyers, but over 197,000 Georgian voters have been improperly purged from the rolls. And that's what this litigation is about. So we had a hearing this past Thursday on December 10th because we had filed for injunctive relief. We asked for the Secretary of State to reinstate those voters so they could vote in the runoff election. So yes, we did have the hearing before Judge Jones, and we don't have a decision yet, but we are optimistic and we're prayerful that those voters who have been illegally and improperly purged from the rolls will be reinstated so they can vote in the runoff election.
One of your colleagues, one of the attorneys there who testified, Ms. Barbara Arnwine, said this suit is absolutely criminal and reprehensible. How significant was this case you argued, ma'am?
Well, I think it was significant insofar as, from my view, having one or two voters improperly purged from the rolls is unacceptable. 197,000 is unthinkable. So I understand why she said it's reprehensible or criminal, because it is significant. There should not, in this day and age in this country, be a single situation where voters are purged improperly from the rolls, period. It's just fundamental to our democracy. It's fundamental to where we are. The 1965 Voting Rights Act marked an important part of our history, where African Americans and others had the right to vote in this country. Then we saw in 2013 the dismantling of a part of the Voting Rights Act with the Shelby County versus Holder case. And after the Shelby County versus Holder case, we saw gradually, and in some instances right away, states imposing draconian and discriminatory measures to prevent or to disenfranchise or to dissuade Black and brown voters from voting. That's really the reality of what's happened. And so we see that manifested throughout the country, and we saw it played out in this election and other elections. So where we are today with still 197,000 people where there's a question mark as to whether they have been illegally purged from the rolls is just unacceptable. And and it is reprehensible. And the Secretary of State has the power to reinstate them, has the power to compare the names. We have the list of every single person and their address, and they have the power to look at those names and verify whether those people are still purged from the rolls, because the voters don't know. What we do know is that voters have gone to the polls to vote, and they've been turned away and told that they're not registered. And these are people who have registered, and that is beyond reprehensible. And so today, and we stand in prayer that we will be able to bring justice to Georgia, bring justice to those 197,000 voters that we believe have been wrongfully purged and have been victims of a classic voter suppression tactic.
Speaking of voter suppression, one of your colleagues also suggested that voter suppression is a plague and a pandemic. Particularly played out in Georgia, but across the country. It's not just a local Georgia problem, is it not?
That's true. It's a problem throughout the country. We have, during the presidential elections, the National Bar Association had over 7,000 lawyers ready, working in what we call our election protection effort, which was protecting the right to vote. It's a nonpartisan effort. And I was in the National Command Center for the Lawyers Committee of Civil Rights under Justice. And what we saw there, as has been widely published, just acts of voter suppression throughout the country, some places worse than others. And to think in this day and age that voters are being intimidated at the polls, are being prevented through very manipulative and direct and intentional measures, preventing from voting is shameful in this country. We're supposed to be the leaders of democracy. We're supposed to be the leaders giving examples throughout the world of how to conduct free and fair elections. Well, I can tell you this is shame on top of shame on top of shame. This should not be happening in 2020 in the United States.
As a journalist, I gotta be proud to suggest that this voter purge case lawsuit was forged by the investigative reporting of Greg Palast. Was it not? The Palast Investigative Fund?
Absolutely. Greg Palast, whose work has been stellar for so long, and many people are familiar with his work, he really uncovered the evidence, if you will, because as lawyers, we deal with evidence. As a trial lawyer, you got the evidence. And he discovered and he uncovered the evidence of voter suppression, those names. And so I will say to Greg Palast for the extraordinary work he has done in Georgia and elsewhere. It's not just Georgia, but in elsewhere. We are very thankful. And the voters of Georgia are thankful because no matter the outcome, there is a silver lining in this cloud. Many Georgians, when this case was first filed and when in September 2020, when the ACLU released its report, which was based on Greg Palast's hard and extraordinary work, many Georgians became aware of this problem. And then we had organizations such as the plaintiffs in this case, Rainbow Push Coalition, Transformative Justice Coalition, Southwest Voter and Education Project, as well as Black Voters Matter Fund. They began to pivot and to redirect their resources to address this extraordinarily egregious issue with people being improperly and illegally purged from the rolls. So maybe some people, with the grace of God, were captured, were preserved, were saved, were able to re-register, because most people didn't even know until they actually got to the polls to vote that they had been purged. So we owe a debt of gratitude to Greg Palast for his fine work again here in Georgia. You never know what the outcome will be in a court of law. We are prayerful, we defer, and we are so honored to have who I believe is a great judge. And so we just pray for an outcome that would allow voters in Georgia who have been improperly purged and treated and victims of voter suppression to be able to vote in the runoff elections and going forward. This is about democracy in America. It's going forward. And so now we are really alerted in a different way to this problem. And there have to be, going forward, measures put in place to prevent this from happening again. And that's a whole nother level discussion. And we're hoping that this litigation will result in that.
Earlier this week, you appeared at a news conference outside the offices of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Let's hear what you had to say then.
It's an honor. Yes. It's a pleasure for me to be the president of the National Bar Association. Yes. I represent the interests of over 66,000 lawyers, judges, law students, law professors in this country. All right. It's an honor for me to be chair of the board of Rainbow Push Coalition. Yes. I'm speaking on behalf of Reverend Jesse Jackson. Yes. It's an honor. But I want you all to know, ladies and gentlemen, that tomorrow I'm a trial lawyer. All right. All right. You see, I know someone who's never lost a case. All right. I know someone who goes into battles and fights to represent over 197,000 Georgians that have been stripped, purged, oppressed from their right to vote. And that's what the battle is tomorrow. That's what we're doing. So I just wanted to say briefly to all of you assembled here today, we thank you for being here. For those who are in the fields, in the movement, marching every day, knocking on doors. During COVID, we say thank you. Yes. To Barbara Arnwine, the mother of election protection, that nonpartisan movement that we are all involved in, I say thank you. To those of you in the ministry, in the church, and to Charles Steele Jr. from SCLC, the only SCLC. We thank you. We thank you for opening up your home. But I want you all to pray.
That was a nice tribute to SCLC, but also a tribute to Reverend Jesse Jackson, the Rainbow Push Coalition. This is still a civil rights movement, is it not? That's not gone away. These civil rights organizations, they still matter, do they not, ma'am?
Oh, they do matter. They're even more relevant now than ever. There's always a silver lining in every cloud. And this cloud right now is COVID. I mean, let's face it, COVID is a cloud over the world. It's a cloud in this country. We're leading the number of deaths in the world, which is just also unbelievable. But the civil rights organizations have always been relevant. But today, because of COVID, because of what we've seen leading up to the elections and what we're seeing now, they have really, really pivoted their interests and have escalated the talk, the dialogue, and the action to fight for those who don't have a voice in our communities, for those who need organizations to fight on their behalf, because it is critically important for everyone to vote. If we just take the voting issue, for everyone to vote. So Rainbow Push is now more relevant than ever. It's always been relevant. It's always been relevant. SCLC has always been relevant, but these organizations are now more relevant than ever. We need to hear the voices of Reverend Jesse Jackson, of Dr. Steele, of Barbara Arnwine, of the presidents and the heads of other organizations, Latasha Brown, because the communities need to know that we have their back. And by the way, I put in there a social justice civil rights organization, and that's the National Bar Association, because I just want everyone to know that Dr. King's lawyer, Rosa Parks' lawyer, the victims of the Tuskegee syphilis experiments lawyer, Fred Gray, the only extraordinary civil rights lawyer in this country that can speak of victories over and over and over, representing people, high profile and people everywhere, is also a lawyer in this case and fighting on behalf of Georgians. And for that, just to have the master, the dean, the legend, fighting, we know that God is in the house. Because as I said, the press conference, history has come full circle. And so I'm just proud to be a vessel, to be one of the trial lawyers amongst giants of trial lawyers on this team. There's so many people who we don't see, who are working behind the scenes, many of them National Bar Association lawyers who have helped to pull together this case and done so much work. I want to call out Gerald Griggs, Maria Banjo, Jonathan Savage, and also Brittany Allen and Brittany Brown as just some, and all the legions of African-American lawyers who are cheering and supporting this effort, because you see, to know that lawyers have your back, because we're the only ones who can go into court and argue your case and file papers. And so that's what we have here. We are very proud to represent the community in Atlanta and those 197,000 voters who have been disenfranchised.
Attorney Hoffler, I was going to mention younger attorneys like Robert Patillo and Gerald Griggs. And there's an army of young attorneys still carrying on the fight, right? I wonder if people really realize how important Black attorneys have been to the civil rights movement.
Well, sometimes it's understated. I think sometimes people just forget who's behind some of these fights. We all know about Thurgood Marshall, Constance Baker Motley,
Right.
Charles Hamilton Houston, Fred Gray. These are people that we've seen historically, particularly during times of segregation or during times when American lawyers were not so visible. We couldn't get into the White Bar Association. Some judges didn't want to hear us, didn't want to admit us to our courts. But because of those leaders, those stellar leaders, we're able now to do the things that we must do in our community. But we've always been very relevant. We didn't get to 66,000 of us in this country by accident. Is because of the need of Black lawyers, our need to want to be advocates. Even if you are a corporate lawyer, you're still an advocate, because chances are, no matter where you stand as a Black lawyer in this country, there are people whose shoulders you stand on, and people who will stand on your shoulders. So in this fight, we do have these young stellar lawyers, Gerald Griggs here in the Atlanta metropolitan area, Robert Patillo, who's also the Southwest chair of Rainbow Push Coalition, and Chris Stewart, and Ben Crump, and Daryl Parks, and Lonita Baker. You see, all of these lawyers that people see on TV day in and day out, they're National Bar lawyers. And yes, I say that with pride. Why? Because it's important for people to recognize where we come from. The National Bar Association is not just a bar association like any other bar association. Our bar association helps to train, to groom leaders in so many different ways. And we're out there. We may not brag all the time, but yes, I'm bragging about this because I have to say that because we are here, we're present, and this is a demonstration, an example of what we continue to do in our communities. It's just that people didn't realize the power of the National Bar Association. We just push and support our lawyers out there. They get their training and grooming. If you talk to every single one of them, they will tell you what they got in their early years and continue to get from the National Bar Association. The National Bar Association is a home for lawyers. Yes, we are members of other bar associations, but there's nothing like the place and the training and the grooming that we get from the National Bar Association. And indeed, I think if Thurgood Marshall were here today, and I know that there's a congregation of lawyers and judges and civil rights leaders in heaven that are saying, yes, yes, you're picking up the mantle and you're taking the fight to another level, which is what our struggle was about. So I'm proud of that. Very proud.
You're very articulate and attractive, and I'm sure the bragging was well intended. But as a president of the National Bar Association and also the board chairman of Rainbow Push, what's next for you? Are you considering running for office? You have a national profile.
I am not necessarily considering running for office. That's not been something that I've considered very seriously over the years. People have suggested that. I feel that I can help people in the courtroom. I can lend my voice to making a difference in the courtroom. But, if an opportunity comes up or presents itself where I can make a greater impact for people who need a voice, then certainly I will consider that. I've had the benefit of representing Reverend Jesse Jackson for 32 of my 33 years as a lawyer. That in and of itself is extraordinary because that means I've been on the forefront with him as a lawyer should be, behind the scenes. You're behind the scenes and you're needed in a courtroom or something with Reverend Jesse Jackson, with, I would say, most issues bearing on human rights, voting rights, international issues, labor issues, for actually 99.9% of my career as a lawyer. So I do have a body of knowledge and have been blessed to have worked alongside Reverend Jesse Jackson and others just in the battle and in the struggle. And I will say that I've always done commercial litigation, catastrophic injury work. I've done tobacco litigation, opioid litigation, employment discrimination. I've had really a mixture of practice areas. And so the message is you can be a corporate lawyer, you can be a commercial lawyer, you can make a difference in the courtroom in a whole bunch of areas and be a civil rights lawyer at the same time, because you should be uncompromising in your dedication to make a difference in your community. And that's what I try to tell young lawyers. Be all you want to be, make all the money you want to make. But remember, this is part of your duty. One supports the other. You must have a base as an African-American lawyer. And your base is your community, the National Bar Association. That's your base. So much business, referrals, networking, mentoring happens on that level. So, and we support each other in our endeavors. So it's that we were able to assemble in short order, by the way, a team of lawyers from throughout the country to support this effort, willing to support this effort in Georgia. Is just a tribute to the National Bar, its strength. And so that's a long way of saying, I don't know what God has in store for me, but I know that I'm ready for the call, whatever it is. But I happen to believe that I can be most effective in the courtroom and in helping people who need a voice. Because so long as I have a voice, I may not have arms, I may not have legs, but if I have a voice, I can make a difference. I can make a difference.
And you have already. Finally, I'm got to ask you, the law has been in the news ever since a presidential election, with President Trump trying to reverse the election results. Are you proud of what your fellow colleagues in the courts and in the courtroom have done with establishing the validity of the Constitution?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is a travesty for us in this country that we are facing what we're facing. But I will say this. This is where this country has looked to our lawyers who are trained in these challenges. And just so that you know, there are many African American lawyers that are in this challenge as well, in this fight. And I am very proud of my colleagues. I'm very proud of those members of the bar who stood up and said, right is right and wrong is wrong. And the judges, let's not forget the judges. That's who I'm most proud of. with this political tension and with some of them being threatened, the families being threatened. There are so many people who have stepped out in the name of democracy and helping this country go forward, whose families are jeopardized and who have personally been threatened by some people, some individuals, but they are not deterred. And so for these judges to look at the evidence and to rule based on the law and the facts, and to come out with what we knew going in was probably going to be the likely result. I applaud them for their courage. I applaud them for sticking to the law. I applaud them for doing what's right for the United States and for the citizens of this country. Let me just tell you something. That's not a black or white statement. That's a statement of fact. This is helping this country. That there are African Americans in the trenches that are pushing and part of the legal teams. That's just part of where we've always been, but we may not have been as visible. But I believe that for people to join together in a rainbow coalition, that's after, when you have worked with Reverend Jackson for 32 years, you always talk in terms of rainbow. But that rainbow coalition, whether it's lawyers, judges, everyone that's involved in this fight, I'm very proud of that effort because we've got to fight for our democracy. We got to fight for our Constitution. We have to fight for what's right. We have to fight for change. We have to fight for what lies ahead for this country because there's some amount of repairing that we have to do. But more importantly, we have to get back on track and eliminate COVID. The impact on our communities is devastating. So we are all walking and chewing bubblegum at the same time. I don't know if you know what I mean by that. We're balancing. We're in the courtroom. We're trying to survive COVID for our families. We're fighting police brutality. We're fighting election suppression, but we're all in it together. And that's the beauty of what's happening now. And that civil rights organizations and bar associations and lawyers are at the center of it makes me proud. Just because it takes courage. People just think, oh, you can just do. No, it takes courage to step out. It takes courage amidst a pandemic to protest, to go door to door for the people in a community. That takes a lot of courage because you're putting, in some respects, on some level, yourself at risk, your life at risk, your family. But that has been the nature of our organization. When we think of what Dr. King and others endured over the years, Rosa Parks, and even before, so many endured with worse circumstances, worse times. We really don't have the right to say, let me just stand on the sidelines. And there, as we said during the election protection effort, there are many ways that lawyers could help. You don't have to necessarily go door to door. You don't have to be in the polls, but the power of your brain, your power of your intellectual ability to research cases, to do briefs, to be in a courtroom is just as valuable because we need to operate on all fronts. And that's what's happened. There's a convergence of all of the talent, and that's what we are. So we have to continue to move forward. We can't rest on our laurels. You're only as good as your last victory, and we have to remain in prayer.
Attorney C.K. Hoffler, we applaud you. We thank you for who you are and what you do. And most of all, thank you for joining Talk to Me. It's been an honor to talk to you, man.
And it's an honor to be here. And thank you so much for what you do. You do so much in our community and the word that you spread. So thank you, Maynard. Appreciate you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Talk to Me. We'll see you next week.